decided to take care of the intro here, and then you'll try to answer briefly my questions afterwards. Right?
Roger.
I'll cut you down if you go over time.
Roger.
Okay, so a bit of a background for those of you who don't know Tobia is and, and what he's doing. I think we met a few years back, I don't remember exactly when, over the internet. Tobia had written a very nice article on an Italian newspaper, and it's quite rare that you read something that makes sense on Italian newspaper. So I wrote to him on Twitter and say, hey, let's talk. We spoke once, found out we both are AS Roma fan, and I said, let's join Founders, man. I need support. So that was basically, I mean, it's fun, but it's probably true, more true than other things I could have said. Tobia joined as an entrepreneur in residence with and that's the interesting part, with the goal of building the company, but without knowing which company. We spent some time together in Copenhagen, where at the end he started looking into something education, which apparently was brewing inside him. At the time, there was not something that we could do together, so we sort of parted as friends, and you moved on. A bit later, you pivoted that idea into a SaaS company called Day One, onboarding for new employees, and you were kind enough to invite us to invest in the angel round of that company. That company pivoted into some sort of a collector book for crypto collectibles, baseball cards thing.
Yeah.
And it was also fun, and we were on board with that too. Then that pivoted briefly into something to take care of kind of remote workers' paperwork, and that was also fun, but brief. And then that too pivoted into what Strive is now.
Correct.
The only reason why Founders is a happy investor in Strive, who just completed Y Combinator, is because I read an interesting article and Tobia is a Roma fan.
Well, that's a great statement of trust.
But what I want to ask you there, like this journey, right? That's the point. The journey you've taken to get to where you are now, and I really hope you don't pivot again, because it's too difficult for me to explain what you're doing to everybody else. What has it taught you, like, this idea about starting companies, the journey you've taken from the idea of starting one company to finding the one that is actually working?
That's a great question. So thanks a lot, everyone, for inviting, and thank you, Stefano, for reaching out that day on Twitter. The reality is that I had no clue what I wanted to do. We had no clue. We developed, I think every idea, I was actually thinking about this these days, like, where do ideas come from, right? And I think ideas come from three places, which can be, it's always an intuition, right? Like you're walking somewhere or you're under the shower and you think something. That's how it starts, like the whole time, right? Or you're talking to someone. But basically, like, it's either you have an insight, right? So you know that there is a problem because you're experiencing it, or you work at a company and you discover the problem through the company, right? So I am sure that people working at Pleo, they can be great fintech founders in the future because they're touching many angles on through Pleo, they're learning a lot of a specific thing, right? So they can come from the insights, like they can have insights. So that's how they generate ideas. There can be problems, like your mom has a problem or you have a problem and you want to solve it, and that's also another way to like generate ideas. And then the other thing is desires, right? I think if you just want something, like I want more comfortable jeans, and then I start Levi's, I don't know, like something like that, right? Or Nike if you want more better running shoes, right? I think other than those three places, you can't really find ideas anywhere else. Like all the other ideas that don't come, like it's just a desire, problems, or insights. Now, if I look back, the problem that we had when we started is that we didn't start from any of those places. So we didn't start from a desire. We didn't start from a problem that we were experiencing, or we didn't start from an insight from our own journey. The only one where we really started from an insight was the payroll problem, which actually was probably a good idea. I would even argue a better idea than what we're doing now. Like, if I had to be devil's advocate, but the reality is that if you look at companies who executed well, on the idea of helping remote teams succeed. And I'm thinking about Deal, which is a YC company, or also Pilot. I think there are like a bunch of others. Like, it's extremely clear that, you know, there is a market need for that, right? And I think for us, the reason why that idea was good is that it came from an insight. We were running a team, and we were like a very small team, but a distributed one. And I, as a CEO, and I'm terrible with administrative stuff, I knew that it was like a fucking pain to, like, you know, put together just contracts and making sure that the compliance of, you know, remote people was always achieved. And I think like that is the insight place. If I look at Strive, what happened is I wanted to fold the company. That's the actual story. I think I called everyone, included you, that we actually wanted to fold the company, because after failing 2-3 products, I mean, you don't feel the greatest entrepreneur in the world, right? So life sucked, and I felt like a failure. I felt like I failed you. I felt like the early investors. I felt like the angels, the team. I felt like really beaten up. And so after talking to my dad, who's a mentor for me and an inspiration, what I decided to do was to fix one of the biggest problems that I always had as an entrepreneur in tech, which I had no shit idea about coding. Like, I couldn't code anything other than, you know, I only put together Excel stuff. Excel was my biggest coding project, right? So that was what I knew about coding. And I was trying to be a CEO of a company, a tech company, without being able to code, without previous product management experience. And the only experience was as an investor. And that's clearly not the best way to succeed. So I started learning to code. And after 5 months of learning to code and building, specializing myself on Bitcoin programming, you know, like, I looked back and I realized that part of me was learning to code, and part of me was the entrepreneur Toby that was evaluating the options, right? So if you go through Coursera and you're a normal human being, what you do is you go through Coursera and you like it or not. If you're an entrepreneur, what you do is you go through Coursera and you think, if I build another Coursera, I do this, this, and that different, right? That's always in the mindset of people who like to create, who want to create things. So after 5-6 months of experiencing the problem of learning to code on the internet online and trying out various solutions and looking at the market, I came to the conclusion that there was an opportunity. And if I look back, it was a 5 months exploration of an idea from the customer point of view that leaded me to leaded us, me and Diego, actually, that was basically my mentor throughout this project, to the insight, right? So we actually experienced both a problem and an insight to some extent. And this is why I think we're going well. Like, it's something that we experienced firsthand.
My point and what I wanted to take here is very much about this. Like, you didn't have any of those 3 sources of idea at the beginning, and yet you probably wouldn't be where you are now if you hadn't started, no matter what.
So yes, that's the other point. The other point is that I think the reason why younger entrepreneurs are advantaged is that if I look back, one of the main, and still the thing that it makes me anxious is, how do I explain this to my investors? How do I explain this to my friends? How do I explain this to my mom? Like, you know, what happens to my life if I do that? And as soon as we progress in life, you know, I'm 32, it starts like, it's just a different feeling than when you're 22. And I think that kids have this advantage that they just try things. They just try things. And I think like, especially YC, I think what they really taught us, and we saw people coming into YC with an idea, 2 days later pivoting, end of YC raising $5 million on paper, like for no reason, right? I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying what is the reality, okay? And I think what they had, this specific team, it's called Digital Brain. It's a team, they just announced their round. They're 2 kids, they flew to Silicon Valley, they're probably 19 or something. They lived on, the hackathon prize money for like 4 or 5 months, and they just tried out shit. They didn't know, like they just tried out things, right? They can build stuff and they just try it out. Now, I don't say that that's the best way to do things, but if you don't get started, you never get started. You know, it's like going to the gym. I think you just need to get started and to be okay with failing.
Very good, Toby. And I think, you know, I wanted you to tell your version of the story, because I believe your story is of course, there are different ways to start companies, you said, but your story very much also tells what we believe in founders, that, you know, you set out to start companies, and then, you know, you'll just get at it and you'll start one eventually. And in our case, more than one. But I really like the story. I think it really exemplifies the spirit, and it goes a little bit against the common knowledge that you need to have that one something before starting. I mean, if you don't have it, you'll find it along the way, right? Okay, let's move on. I wanted to ask you something then a bit more practical now. You just mentioned you were in Y Combinator. It's of course, you know, a famous place for startups to be, and all of that. I have a kind of two questions related to that. The first one, I'll ask you to be brief if you can. What's the most surprising, as in kind of counterintuitive things that you took from them? You know, going there with your expectation, and what did you take out that kind of you didn't expect to take out and positively surprised you?
I think we also discussed this briefly, but I think I went back, like they think like butchers. Like they think like in Italian say macellaio, which means like literally the butcher, you know? And I think they think like butchers, like, you know, like, for example, how much money could you make per year? Right? That's a simple question that they may ask. Right? They don't want like a complicated answer. They want, I can have 50 million users paying $2 each, 100 million per year. That's it. And everything they do, it's very much with this spirit, like of extreme simplicity. Like there is no overstructure, right? There is no too much of intellectual thinking. Like it is bare attitude of, it is an attitude that is not the consultant attitude or not the intellectual attitude. It's the butcher's attitude. Like if you take a butcher's and you teach him everything about tech, it is likely to become a partner at YC more than more than the other type of people, more than a professor becoming, like, you know, if you teach them all of tech to a professor, they're not going to become a partner at YC. I think if you teach a butcher, they can actually think like the partner at YC. And I think that's the way you have to think about it. Like those people are butchers. And I think in a good way, like not in a negative way, you know, in a good way. So I think that's really counterintuitive, because I thought that going in, I would have been blown away by this intellectual greatness or something like that. No, they're actually just, you know, very practical people. And I think that's something that was really refreshing for me. So yeah.
You get to think about the basics, right? You know, how much money do you make? How much money do you have? You know, is somebody giving you money? Take it. Stuff like that.
Like if I give you, can I do something that was not?
No, don't get off track.
No, don't worry. Go. I just want to take something just to give you an idea, but it's fine. If you want to go to the next question.
Yeah, no. I think that was interesting. We talked about it, as you said, and I also again like it. You know, you can of course intellectualize what you do, but at the end of the day, especially at the beginning, it boils down to very simple rules.
Yes.
That I think was interesting that you can talk about is this thing that I mean, there is a company that is older and better known, if not for anything else than size and age, that does a similar thing that you do, Lambda School. Many people know it. Yeah. And there was also a company coming out from Y Combinator. And in the demo day, you were encouraged actually to just be explicit and say, we are Lambda for Europe. That was kind of your tagline. And in the same batch, there was also a company that was, we are Lambda for South America.
Yeah.
How has that kind of changed this, you know, oh my God, there is competitors and all of that. Like, how is that your view about, you know, cloning and competition and doing the same thing as others do?
So that's a great question. So first thing first, do you guys know Brex? I mean, you probably know also for Pleo, but Brex, yeah, I think people in the audience, I can't see. Huh?
The clone of Pleo.
Exactly. So Brex, I think it's called Brex because it's Amex from Brazil. So BREX, Amex from Brazil. Because what these guys have built is Amex from Brazil, because they're two Brazilian kids. So, and I think I haven't seen their pitch, and they're now worth $3 billion in 2 years or 3 years. But basically, like what they did is we're building Amex for tech, and we're from Brazil, so it's Brex, right? We are building Stripe, which is Lambda School for Europe. Now, if you look at Brex, of course, it's not Amex, like has nothing to do with Amex. But that at that specific point in time, which was the demo day, when you have 2 minutes to catch attention of people, you have to say something that people understand in 1 second, right? You don't have time to, again, to explain the overall vision or whatever it is. So the easiest way for us to go through the, get the message through to people that were interested was, we're Lambda School for Europe. If you look under the hood, we're actually not Lambda School for Europe, because we say, we are preaching on the deferred tuition model and you pay only after getting hired. But the reality is that Europe is much more complicated. We are looking at other monetization strategies for the future, and it's going to look like completely different than Lambda. But the easiest way for us to say who we were in 1 minute was Lambda School for Europe. And this is why the bachelor's mentality really matters, right? Because if I was not a bachelor, or if they were not a bachelor, they were like, let's find a way for you to say what you do, but not mention Lambda. Their strategy was the opposite. Let's mention Lambda is the easiest thing to do, right? So,
again, I think also this goes back to a principle that I wanted to, and there are so many good things that that Strive tells us about what we like, in general. And in this case, is again the principle, start easy. Don't worry too much. The fact that you say I'm doing Lambda for Europe is just your starting point. You feel protected by the fact that they're doing something proven. They get going, and as you get going, you'll end up doing something that is not what they end up doing. I mean, it's impossible that unless you really copy each other step by step. I really like this idea of, you don't need to find something unique. You don't need to find something super intellectual. You don't need to find something at all. You just need to start, right?
Yeah.
That's the main point. Sarah, how are we doing on time?
I think we can go a little bit longer.
Okay, then I'll skip the second final question, and I'll just ask you the final question.
That's okay.
I've heard you have some special fondness for octopus.
Say what?
You have some special something with octopus. You're really keen on octopus. You think they're a very smart creature.
Well, octopus aren't stupid either, I guess. I don't know what's happening here. What the hell is happening? Oh, that is my face with the octopus and stuff.
No. I think, Sebastian told me that you spent an entire night ranting about something with octopus. So I wanted to.
Well, don't get me started, because I'm very passionate about that.
Very good. Yeah, no, I think that was the closing one. Sorry, if you want to stick to the 9 o'clock time, then we can. I mean, of course we can go on, but up to you.
I mean, I'm fine for one more question. I think I have a call.
What about taking questions from the crowd?
Oh
yeah.
I have a question. What was the best thing about YC?
Again, getting back to my roots, like I dropped out of college and I started selling event tickets. So that was my first real job. I was a club runner. Runner means that you clean up and, you bring flyers here and there, and, you sell tickets, and literally fucking tickets, and I think that was one of the happiest times of my life. And then we got to organize incredible concerts, and it was really fun. But I was a very practical person, right? Because I had to sell tickets, and in the end, my business was selling tickets. After getting into tech, I started reading books too much, and I think I started over intellectualizing everything, which brought me a lot of anxiety and a lot of imposter syndrome and all that shit. And I think YC was kind of going back to my roots, I am authorized to be a bachelor in tech. I am finally authorized to be who I am. I don't need to be an intellectual. I don't need to be, smart as other people want to be. And I just need to sell tickets. And now selling tickets for me is getting students in, teaching them, placing them into companies, and then collecting money, and repeating this process 1 million times. And that's it.
Cool.
I have a question. Can you hear me, Tobia?
Yeah, of course, man.
Hey, how are you? I think maybe just there was some very good, thoughts on the whole thing about getting started. But I think especially with your story about, which is also something that I and we struggle with from time to time, is the whole thing about when do you kind of move on to the next thing? And now you've tried it 3 times or 2 times, right? When is because one thing is getting started, another one is about sticking it out and actually trying to survive the trough that you're going through, right?
I mean, you guys have much more experience than me, and I think your guidance was valuable in this sense. But the reality is that unless you are working on a topic that you know really well, and then you change idea, but you stay in the same topic. Let's say, I don't know if it makes sense, but you stay in the same topic. I think 3 to 6 months is what you need to know. Like, if you can't get started in 3 to 6 months, unless you're building a nuclear reactor, or unless you're building something like, it is web. It's probably a web app. It's probably something that you can test with a landing page. It's probably something you can test with the small ads or talking to like 20 companies. If you can't do it in 3 to 6 months, you're toasted anyways. So my feeling is that, 3 to 6 months, spend as least as you can, pay yourself as least as you can, so you're hungry, and you don't overspend. And I think 3 to 6 months to validate an idea. After that, move on. We know personal attachment, let's say, like, try to leave the ego out of it, because that's a big problem. But if you can do it, you try 3, 4, 50 times, sooner or later you hit something. Keep swinging. I think that's a spirit, I guess.
Good answer.
You want to ask your final question, Stefano, and then I think we'll finish for the morning.
I don't know if it can be too short. Okay, so you are a remote team. You're teaching people how to code remotely. You've taken part in YC first edition, full remote. Can you agree that remote really sucks, or are you sold?
So remote, we actually had this discussion internally. We met for 2 weeks. We stayed in my apartment and worked, and it was terrible. We didn't build any, it was terrible, because the reality is that now in our DNA, we are a remote team, right? So we are used to some things. So I think that remote sucks at the beginning, as everything sucks at the beginning. Like, even when you start drinking coffee, sucks at the beginning, and then you love it for life, right? So I think that's the same thing. You just need to get used to it. And I think you just need to build tools, like ways to do things that you didn't like. The transition is really hard, but it is not always easy, and it's not for every team, I guess. So yeah, but we are probably a remote team in the DNA. So for us, it's slightly different, I would say. But yeah.
Very good. Thank you for your time, man.
Of course, man.